Here we go. So welcome everybody. This is Darren from Komprise. Welcome to today's webinar with Komprise and AWS. The topic today is a modern data strategy for the automotive industry with Komprise and AWS. And I'm really excited to have two featured speakers, presenters, demonstrators with me today, Paul and Krishna. Why don't we actually go off of the PowerPoint and into a video, and we can just say hi to everybody. Here we are. Want to introduce yourself, Paul?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Darren. Hey, Krishna. Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Baccaro, the go-to-market storage specialist here at AWS, and I work with our global automotive customers, helping them build a modern data strategy. This topic's really exciting. It's incredibly relevant, and I'm happy to be presenting alongside Krishna and the team from Komprise today.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul, for doing this with us. I think this should be a very informative session for our customers and prospects. And I'm Krishna. I'm a co-founder of Komprise, and along with Darren, we're going to be leading the presentation and the demo and getting Paul's wisdom on the automotive industry.
All right. Well, I've got my cup of coffee. I'm ready to go. So I'm going to go back to our regularly scheduled content here, and really looking forward to this discussion. It's like you said, Krishna, super relevant. But let's just back up for a second and talk about unstructured data, what it is, where it's coming from, why it's so relevant and important for folks in the automotive industry and other industries to be able to manage.
Yeah, I'll give a broad background, and then we can get Paul's thoughts on specifically what's happening in the automotive industry. But pretty much every customer we talk to is facing a lot of data growth, and you can see it in our own personal lives. I mean, you can see that every time you buy a new phone, it has more cameras than you ever thought you needed. I think now there are phones with like 5 or 6 cameras on them, which means they're taking much better quality pictures. Your car is taking pictures as it drives. Your car has multiple cameras on it. It has a lot of safety equipment that's constantly monitoring what you're doing. And all of that data is going back to some data centers and the cloud. And it is all unstructured data, meaning that it is not data in neat little rows and columns in a database. It's images, it's videos, it's audio, it's reports on crash tests and things like that. So unstructured data is where there's a lot of growth, and you can see the green bar here. It's growing, it's outpacing the growth of database data, and it's going to continue this way in every industry. And definitely the automotive industry is facing the same thing. Paul, I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so, Krishna. And I think, when we talk to our customers, our customers need solutions that can scale, to your point, but the solutions also need to be open and flexible to incorporate all sorts of data sources, right? So it's not just the volume of data growth that we see, which is absolutely true, but we see a couple other vectors, if you will, right? The variety of data sources have definitely increased as you look back from 3 to 5 years, as well as the velocity with which the data comes in, right? So a lot of streaming content comes in, a lot of images, videos, all of those things, and that's drastically changed in the last 3 to 5 years. So the solutions that our customers are asking for really need to be open and flexible to allow those data sets to come in, do it quickly, and do it efficiently. So I definitely think your point is well taken here.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point about kind of the openness and being standards based as well, Paul. Because I mean, a lot of customers also I think are going through a lot of consolidation in the industry because there's a lot of innovation happening in different places. They're often acquiring companies. They may be acquiring startups, in places like autonomous driving. And you've got to incorporate all these different data platforms together as well. The other thing we're seeing is, there's definitely a huge transformation to the cloud that we've been witnessing for, almost 15, 16 years now. But, along with that, we're also starting to see a lot of edge data, particularly data from devices and sensors and cameras and all these things, that there's a lot of data coming in at the edge. And I think, Paul, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but the volume of that edge data might get so big that you can't just automatically move all of that to the cloud, and some of it might be obsolete and redundant data, right? And I think we have a point later about this, but there's got to be a way to easily filter data from the edge to the cloud when it's needed. I don't know if you want to say anything about this now, or you want to hold off till later.
Well, I tend to agree, and it's even bigger than just a storage problem per se, right? Or a storage challenge, I should say, right? It's networking too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So much of the data, as you alluded to, is at the edge, and the data needs to move into the cloud. So sending extra data or data that might be already in the cloud is wasteful from both a storage and a networking perspective. So to be able to handle that data at the edge, I think is really important. So we can talk more about that in a second, but I agree with you.
Yeah, no, the network is a great point. And, a lot of these places, I mean, we all know, bandwidth is kind of the big issue in a lot of places. The other interesting thing, Paul, that, I've personally seen is that, about, 10 years or so ago, I would say AI was mostly a buzzword. I mean, people were just saying AI for everything, but it's really changing. And we can definitely see it in the automotive industry, where machine learning in particular is significantly advancing, what cars can do and what, safety mechanisms can do, etc. Right? So I think machine learning AI and enabling that on your data very easily is definitely a trend that is picking up steam and is going to be key to differentiation in the future. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Artificial intelligence has been around for a long, long time, right? It's been around, I think, since the 40s or 50s. But what we've seen specifically in the automotive space is an acceleration of it. I think, the statistic I saw recently is by 2025, we're going to see approximately 8 million autonomous or semi-autonomous vehicles on the road. That is an extremely high number, right? And you look at the evolution of it as we've gone from level 0, all the way up through level 5 autonomous driving. So much of that now is artificial intelligence and machine learning driven, that it's really creating challenges, as we said, for our customers. So I think we've got some great solutions, and I'm looking forward to the next few slides here.
Okay, excellent. And yeah, we talked about all this data coming in. We talked about, challenges, with not only storage, but also the network and being efficient across edge and cloud, and being able to leverage, analytics and the power of the cloud for AI, ML. And really to enable all of these, what you want is a simple, consistent, systematic way of looking at your data across all your platforms, across your data centers, and consistently move it to the right place at the right time and use all the power of the cloud on the data. And that's broadly what we call data management. So data management is just a way to look at your data wherever it lives, to be able to systematically move that data without getting in the way, and then being able to use that data. And that's what today's webinar is all about. And we're going to actually show you live demonstrations of all of these things. So just a little bit of background about Komprise and our partnership with AWS. So Komprise is a data management company. We provide a cloud service for data management, and for unstructured data, for any file and object data. We are an advanced tier partner with AWS. We're fully certified, we're well-architected framework on AWS, and we have a lot of joint customers with AWS. And a lot of our customers are happy, and they tend to expand and buy more from us, and that's very important to us. We take our customer satisfaction very seriously. And you all know AWS, so there's not really a slide on about AWS. But what we will get to is what are the specific problems from those generic problems that we talked about earlier about data growth and managing data across edge and cloud, specifically, how does that relate to data management? When we look at it and we say, okay, what do you need to do to manage all this, data that you're getting? We really look at it as, enabling three things, analyze, mobilize, and then, derive value. So the analyze part is, how can we just easily, without moving any data, how can we just point at your data across all your data sources and show you how much data you have? How is it growing? Who's using it? Help users find the data they need. So how can we give you analytics that not only helps IT make better decisions, but also helps your users and your researchers find data easily? So that's kind of what that's one part of data management. How do you deliver analytics? The second part is, how do we actually move the data? Paul mentioned that moving data is difficult, not only because of the data and the storage and the resources it consumes, but also because of network constraints. So how can we efficiently move your data to the right place at the right time at the right cost? Because one of the benefits of AWS is the tremendous innovation that they keep bringing, and all the different classes and tiers of file and object storage that AWS provides. And using those in conjunction with your on-premise NAS storage, you could be saving 70% or more of your costs, even without moving all your data to the cloud. And we're going to show you how you can easily start using the cloud and saving money right away with your data. And to Paul's earlier point, we're also going to show you how you can do all of this in an open fashion without getting locked into a particular storage vendor or storage architecture or particular design. How can you actually use your data in the cloud fully while taking advantage of all the different resources on premise and in the cloud? And then we're also going to show you how you can enable AI and ML on your data. And I think, Paul, you had some good data points and some examples of why you need a consistent way to manage data across data centers and cloud. So I don't know if you want to give some of the data points you had.
Yeah, I did. I want to highlight actually something on this slide, Krishna, because I think it's really important, and a lot of times it goes kind of overlooked. It's really that second bullet around the ability to filter data. We hear this a lot from our customers. You said it earlier, pulling data in from the edge, sometimes, whether that may be a vehicle, it might be a sensor, some of those locations are pretty remote. And connectivity might be suboptimal, right? You may have a poor internet connection. You may have poor cell service to be able to move that data back to the cloud. So the ability to filter data and not just send absolutely everything is critical. The example that we've heard, it's a simple example, but I think it speaks to the point, is there's a lot of vehicles out there and they're constantly capturing images and videos. A lot of that data is already in the cloud. So if a car is going down the road and it captures an image of a stop sign, right? That stop sign is likely, that data has already been captured previously. So that data doesn't necessarily need to be sent again. So the ability to filter at the edge rather than just sending data, it does a couple of things for the customer. First of all, it makes the entire process, the entire solution much more efficient, right? You're not storing data over and over again if you don't need to. You're helping with a network problem that may exist because you have poor connectivity, and you're able to do that all at the edge, which is really critical and a very nice feature for our customers.
Yeah, no, that's great. Excellent. So we're going to go show that. And also, Paul, I think we were also talking about how, some of the customers, they may already have sunk costs. Maybe they already have file storage that has a 5-year lifespan on their data center, and they don't have to wait for 5 years to start using AWS, correct? So we can show how
You
we can
don't.
do like a smart tiering of that data, for example.
And Christian, it's a great point. We hear this a lot from our customers who may have made an investment previously and they don't want to throw it away. And we certainly discourage that. We don't want them to throw it away. We want them to make the best use of it. So, right, the ability to tier data in either direction, and more importantly, Christian, maybe the ability to burst in either direction. Right. So if you have a bursting capability either in AWS, if you want to leverage your on-prem infrastructure, or if you want to burst on-prem, you can do that both ways. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, excellent. And we're going to show how you can do that, how you can get data to the cloud without lock-in and actually use the full power of the all native AWS services on the data. So we're going to actually show you a live demo of that as well. Excellent. Paul, I mean, one of the reasons for getting data native to AWS, I think, is because AWS can become a great data lake for data, and there's a shift happening in that market, right? Do you want to speak a little to that?
Sure. Yeah, there really is, and this is an interesting topic because it's a really significant shift. And if you look at the picture on the left, that's more of the more traditional way to do analytics, right? Is you'd have a few data sources, like a transactional database, for example. You might have a CRM system. You may have some flat files. And typically, you take those data sources, you'd build out an ETL infrastructure, or extract, transformation, and load for folks who aren't familiar with it. And then that data would be loaded into your data warehouse. And then on the front end, you would run SQL queries, or you may have a business intelligence tool that allow you to run analytics. And what happens is, over time, as Christian and I have talked about, your data sources can change, right? The structure of them might change. You may want to add new data sources to your repository. And what happens is, every time that happens, the data warehouse structure, the ETL structure specifically, has to change. And it has to be able to accommodate those new sources. So what happens is, you create yet another data warehouse or another silo to accommodate those new sources. So what happens to our customers is it becomes a little bit of a maintenance nightmare from a governance perspective, from a security perspective, and then those multiple data marts or data silos, they proliferate over time. So what we're seeing, and I think it's the right approach, is we're seeing a shift to a much more open and flexible data lake approach. And it doesn't necessarily mean that what you've done in the past, building data warehouses, it doesn't mean that goes away per se. It just becomes incorporated into a much more open and flexible infrastructure, right? That allows you, if you want to run SQL queries against it, you absolutely can. If you'd like to run machine learning models against it, you can do that too. So I think those things are all really important as we kind of see the shift from a data warehouse approach to a much more open data lake approach. And then when we look at data lakes, storage really constitutes the fabric of that data lake. And the large majority of our customers primarily use Amazon's S3 as the storage layer for their data lake. And there's a couple of reasons, and you can see them up there. But first and foremost, S3's unmatched durability, availability, and scalability. Christian and I talked earlier about how important it is to have a scalable platform to support these multiple growing data sources. And then second, security. Security at AWS is our highest priority, no question about it. And S3 provides a wide range of security, compliance, and audit capabilities that are really designed to meet the most stringent requirements for security-sensitive organizations. Next, analytics need to be fast, right? That's one of the big benefits of data warehouse is query times are critically important. And S3 provides not only a low cost, but a high performance storage with millisecond response times. And lastly, I hit on it earlier, but right, the ability to have an open and flexible platform to run your analytics. S3 has built-in features and complementary services that allow you to query data without needing to copy, move, and load data into a separate analytics platform. You can run analytics directly on your data stored in S3. We have features such as S3 Select to allow you to run simple SQL expressions against your data, or S3 Object Lambda, where you can add your own code to get S3 GET requests to modify and process data as it's returned back to your application. So I think it's really important as we talk about this to remember the openness and flexibility of these platforms. And then lastly, I'd add one more thing, and you can see it on the right there, cost optimization. There is a lot of talk about performance and being able to do analytics on your data, but S3 and specifically AWS have done a really nice job over the years in cost optimizing these platforms, right? Think features such as S3 intelligent tiering, right, which allow us to move your data on the back end to the most cost-effective tier based off of existing access patterns. It's a really nice feature for our customers, and they've typically used that over time to run analytics. Excuse me. All right, so with that said, I'm going to kick it back over to Krishna to talk a little bit more about the data-centric approach with Komprise.
Perfect, Paul. And as Paul mentioned, S3 is a great destination to use as your data lake. And you want to get data into native S3 format so you can take advantage of all those benefits that Paul mentioned. Komprise is a data management solution that does just that. So Komprise actually bridges all your different file storage platforms or NAS platforms along with your cloud, object storage platforms, so that you can look at all your file data and your object data. You can get analytics on all of it, and you can transparently move files into Amazon S3 classes and make them still look like files on the file storage while having them be native objects in S3 and take full advantage of all the capabilities that Paul mentioned. And that's what I'm actually going to demo to you now. I'm actually going to show you how we can bring data from an Isilon or a NetApp or a Windows file server and have it look like a file on the NAS platform while it's a native S3 object on AWS. And after I show that, we're actually going to show you an example of the filtering of data, where we can filter some data from a data center and run analytics in AWS. So I'm actually going to show live demos on all of these. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to go through these slides quickly and get to the demo. So the three things that I'm going to show in the demo are how you can do a smart data tiering from your file storage into Amazon using Komprise and have native access to the data. And I'm also going to show you how we can enable a smart workflow for filtering data. I'm not going to show you much about migration in this demo, but if you're interested in migrating to AWS from your data centers, Komprise helps with that as well. And there are other webinars on it. So with that, I'm actually going to shift and show you my screen. So let me try and share my screen.
And as Krishna is sharing her screen here, I want to remind folks, there are some good questions coming in, so we'll take those towards the end, but you can use the question tab to submit questions.
Yeah, great. So hopefully you can see my screen here. This is the Komprise service, data management service. Basically, this is the console. When you can buy Komprise through the AWS Marketplace. If you start using it, this is what you would see. The first thing you would do is connect Komprise to all the storage that you want to look at. So in this example, you can see that we're connected to different file or NAS storage platforms, including FSx, Isilon, NetApp, Pure, etc. And you literally just point Komprise at the IP addresses of the different storage that you want to look at. And once you do that, within minutes, Komprise starts giving you analytics. The first thing that we hear from every customer is that we have accumulated so much data over time, we really don't know how much data we have, or how it's growing, or who's using it, or who's growing data the fastest. So Komprise gives you all those analytics. So the first thing it shows you is, look, you have 2.5 petabytes of data in this environment, and you can see that a lot of this data is quite cold. Paul talked about cost optimization. Since data is always growing, cost is clearly an important thing for data. And often 70 to 80% of your data has not been accessed in 6 months or more, and it's cold. So that's data that's a great candidate, even if you're not fully moving to the cloud. Tiering that cold data from your file storage into Amazon is a way to save 70 or 80% of your costs immediately without changing anything for users or applications. And so once you see the profile of your data, Komprise, of course, shows you how fast it's growing and gives you all kinds of analytics on the data, like, what kinds of files you have, who's using it, and things like that. But with all these analytics, you can actually set different policies. So we could say, look, anything over 6 months old, we want to get it into a bucket in Amazon. And if we do that, I don't know if you saw, but Komprise is actually projecting the savings you're going to get if you implemented this policy. And all of these costs are based on your own on-premise costs and your cloud costs. So you can see how much you can save by using Amazon and Komprise with your data. So once you set your different policies, you can simply activate this, and Komprise actually tiers data, copies data, migrates data based on your policies. So here, what I'm going to do is show you how, once it's migrated data, what that looks like. So once you activate this plan, it's comprises moving data, and anything that comprises moved basically looks still like a file on your local file system. And we don't put any agents, we don't put any stubs. This is a completely standards-based way. We have a solution called Komprise Dynamic Links, which basically creates a link on your file system. It looks like a local file. So here's a file that we have actually moved to Amazon, but it looks like a local file. And I can just double click on it and open it just like I would open any other file. So as users or applications, you don't see any change, but Komprise has actually moved this file into Amazon S3. And it's available as an object in S3. So here I'm going into Amazon S3. I'm not using Komprise. I'm not using my original, Isilon or NetApp or any file storage. I'm going natively into S3, and I can just go into my bucket, and I see that same file that I opened before is here as an object on S3. And why is this important? It's important because of all the things Paul mentioned, right? All the services you have on Amazon, whether you want this file to be in Glacier Instant Retrieval, so you get the best savings on it, or you want to run a data lake service on it, or you want to run a cognitive service from AWS on it, all of that is available because this file, we're maintaining the duality. It's both a local file it looks like a file on the file storage, as well as it's a native object in S3. Paul,
hey Krishna,
mention anything on this?
I was just going to say, that's really important, and I want to make sure that doesn't just get passed over, because that's a critical feature that our customers are asking for, is the ability to tier data into S3, but then be able to access that data natively through S3, right? They don't have to go through another platform to then access the data. They can access it as a file, on-prem or local or whatever, but then once that data is moved to AWS, they have the ability to natively access that through S3. That's a really critical feature that I want to make sure our customers understand.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you highlighted that, Paul. Yeah, exactly. And the other benefit of this native access is that you can use all the analytics services in the cloud. So I'm going to actually switch and show you a little bit of a different demo on that filtering. So I'm going into an environment here, and I'm going to show you a live example of filtering. So this is a smaller environment. Here, let's say we are a car manufacturer, and we're testing our autonomous vehicles, and we've been running tests in different sites, and sometimes the cars are crashing. And so we want to collect just the crash test data and filter it to find the test data where the car crashed because it abruptly stopped in traffic. and only take those files to the cloud. I'm going to show you how you can do a workflow like that. Before I showed you how you could just move data based on the age of the data, but Komprise actually is a flexible data management solution, meaning that you can set your policy however you want. You could say, not only say, I want to move data that's, over 6 months old. You can actually set a policy to say, I want to move data of this type, by these users, filtered in this way. That's what I want to move, or that's what I want to tier, etc. So you can build any query you want in Komprise and move data based on that query, or even execute a function on the data based on that query. And so that's what I'm going to show you now. So here, Komprise has actually indexed all our data into a global file index. And so I can start building my queries. So I'm going to look for all the crash reports in the year 2019. So I'm going to look for anything that has the 2019 in the name and is in autonomous vehicles. And so out of that total data that we have, Komprise filtered and showed that there are 105 files that are fitting this query. But we don't still want to move 105 files into AWS because we don't need all the crash reports. In this scenario, we're only looking for the crash reports where the car abruptly stopped in traffic. So I'm going to show you how we can filter for that specific criteria. So I'm going to create a new query and I'm going to call it, stopped in traffic. And for this new query, I'm going to actually look for a specific tag. I'm going to look for when the car actually stopped in traffic. And because we have not annotated the data with anything yet, when I run this tag, when I run this query, it's saying there's no files that fit this. But I'm going to go ahead and save this query. And I'm going to show you how you can actually filter data by running an external function. Let's say you wanted to run a function that opened the image, looked for when it was stopped in traffic, and culled those and tagged those as stopped in traffic. I'm going to show you how you could run a function like that. So I'm actually going to create a new plan, and I'm going to say, I'm going to tag stopped in traffic. Stopped in traffic. And in this plan, I'm actually going to create a way to tag data. And I'm going to find all the files from that query. So instead of moving data based on age, I'm going to look for these crash reports that I had. And those crash reports, I'm now going to execute a function on it. So I'm going to say on these crash reports, I'm going to look for where it stopped in traffic, and I'm going to tag that data. So you can actually execute workflows through Komprise. You don't just have to move data based on simplistic criteria. You can actually build a series of steps in Komprise to do filtering at the edge and then moving data, etc. And once you create a plan like that, Komprise will continuously execute that plan. So here we are running this plan. So what Komprise is doing is it's going to search across all the files. It's searching across those 105 crash report files. This is going to, the refresh of the UI will just take a little bit of time as it's running through it. It's basically going to run through, it's going to find data. You can see that already it looked at 13 files. So it's going to go through all the 105 files, and it's going to look for the ones where, the external function said, yeah, this is stopped in traffic, and it's going to tag all of that. So you can automatically have this environment tag data for you, and then use the results of that tag data in another move. So you could say, like, for example, hey, let me find all these tag files, and then let me actually move it elsewhere. So those are the kinds of things we can do. It's going to run a little bit longer, and because it's actually processing this live. And while it's doing that, Paul, do you have any comments on a scenario like this? Is this something you have seen customers wanting? Do you want to speak about that at all while
Yeah,
the demo is running?
Sure. I think it hits a couple things. Being from New York, the stopped in traffic example hit a little too close to home, but I think there's a couple of interesting things here, right? Again, the ability to do that filtering is critical, and the ability to see this data in real time. I think it's one of the things that we talk a lot about is access patterns with data, and the interface you had up earlier that kind of showed, hey, in the last 0 to 30 days, this is where you're at. That one, the heat map, right? By time of last access. I think that's really critical, and I'm actually surprised at the number of customers who aren't really sure. Is it the 80-20 rule? Is 80% of our data cold and 20% of it's hot? That seems to be where most customers sit, but really gaining that insight into exactly how much of your data from a capacity perspective, and then showing them a potential cost savings over time by archiving, I think is really nice. I think that's a feature as a customer that I would really enjoy, because it gives you that kind of real-time look or real-time insight into your data.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, yeah.
Got a few questions. I wanted to I think it's probably a good moment to do that. And really for you, Paul, because you're working with very large organizations that for them, this may be very kind of a very new concept. One question I have is if you are a large IT shop that's heavily invested in a lot of on-prem storage systems, where do they typically start? And maybe they just, as we talked about earlier, maybe they just 3 years ago did a 5-year refresh. Where do they typically start with AWS? How do you kind of help them move from the idea to the execution? Do you have some guidance for those folks on the call that maybe just wanting to go down this path, but are kind of hesitant?
Yeah, I mean, we really take a prescriptive approach, Darren. I think it's, first and foremost, we look at the application and the interdependencies between applications and data, right? So, in other words, we help our customers look at which applications and which data sets make sense to move, what the level of disruption might be. And then, we certainly take into consideration any investment that they've made on-prem. The one, nice thing that we have is we have a variety of storage services in AWS across block, file, and object that can really accommodate any data set. Specifically, most recently, back in September, we released our FSx for ONTAP service, which is fully functional ONTAP as a native service in AWS. So when we talk to customers who have NetApp on-prem, that's a really easy way to kick off or start the migration into the cloud because they're already familiar with NetApp. It's served them very well. It's a great platform. And now we've got a native service in AWS that meets all of their needs. But it's native to AWS. So that's kind of the approach we take. It's really prescriptive. It's all about the customer. It's about making them feel comfortable and making sure that we're successfully able to move their data from on-prem into AWS where it makes most sense.
That's a great summary. Maybe I'll ask you the same for you, Krishna, because we do have some folks from NetApp on the call. We work a lot with customers that do have that kind of situation. And I notice you're showing the data donut, right? So we talk about know first. We often hear at Komprise, hey, we didn't know something like this was even out there. Where do you enter in, and how do you typically start the conversation with an organization that's kind of new to this discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Paul alluded to, a lot of customers actually don't know, the profile of their data. So analytics is the first place we always start. You don't have to do anything. You just point Komprise at all your environments, and you get to see what your data looks like, how it's being used, and all of that. And then, whether you want to leverage file storage in the cloud, or object storage, or you want to leverage a service like FSx ONTAP, we do smart migrations and smart tiering and smart data management to these environments. So, for example, we can take your hot data into FSx ONTAP and your cold data transparently into something like Glacier Instant Retrieval, which is 40 times plus less expensive, and is a very good place for your colder data that is not being actively used. And so there's smart ways to do that transformation. and it's all non-disruptive. And that's what we see customers starting with the analytics, and then either doing a hybrid cloud approach to starting to adopt AWS, or in kind of an intelligent or smart migration approach.
Awesome. Let me just roll through a couple other questions. But first, is there anything else you wanted to show? One of them might be related.
Show that this did finish. It looked at the 105 files. So now if I go back and it ran the external function, and now if I go to that same stopped in traffic, you see that before it couldn't find any files. Now it found 3 files. So basically, we were able to call an external image processing function and have it tag data and then see the results of the tags all through a systematic process. And now we could take this and copy this into a data lake in AWS, and we could just add that to the plan, and the whole workflow would just run automatically.
That's really powerful. So, Paul, you talked about that, all the photos that are being taken by these machine learning sensors. In this case, to your earlier point, I mean, this would be filtering it and only moving what's relevant into that analytics repository, that data lake, right?
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
One of the questions I did get asked here is, are there limitations to any of the services Komprise can run? You want to take that, Krishna?
No, Komprise works. I'm not sure what they mean by limitations, but it's a completely elastic service. So there is, we have a lot of 100 petabyte kind of, we have some 100 petabyte customers. Most of our customers are in the tens of petabytes, billions of files, and it scales to that kind of capacity very easily. And it works with any NFS, SMB, and object environment. So it is a non-proprietary, standards-based approach.
Got it. I think in this case, it's about the third-party functions and services that you called out in the demo. Anything you can say about that?
Yeah, you can run. So in this demo, I just showed running an external function inside a data center because we wanted to filter at the edge before bringing data to the cloud. But you could run an Amazon Lambda service, and I could have called a Lambda service instead in the cloud. I could have called, Amazon Macy to do detection on the contents of the data, PII detection. So you could run services in the cloud, and you can run services at the edge. You can define any of those. You can. We have both APIs to do that, either at the edge, data center, or cloud.
Got it. One for you, Paul. There was a question as you were talking about the data lake, and I'll just actually go back to that slide. Actually, maybe as we do it, we can talk about a customer story because it might be help explain. The question was about what Krishna showed is really filtering and moving just the right kind of data in or file information into your data repository. Does that then replace the need for ETL in your data lake scenario, or is that complementary? What's changing in terms of kind of the traditional extract, transform, and load into a warehouse now in your world of data lakes?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I want to be clear, right? The ETL process, it certainly is not replaced. It's to answer your question directly, it's much more complementary. And ETL processes in the data lake architecture, they don't go away. But one of the benefits of shifting from the data warehouse architecture to the data lake architecture is that ETL infrastructure, ETL process, it doesn't become a bottleneck in the way that it could potentially in the data warehouse world, right? That ETL process in the data warehouse world is really the heartbeat of the data warehouse because everything goes through it, and it's got to come out in a structured format to fit into the data warehouse. Data warehouses can be a part of a data lake. So again, the ETL process doesn't necessarily go away. It's just minimized from the sense that it's not as critical, right? Komprise does a really good job of moving data potentially from on-prem into AWS, into S3, but that's complementary to what an ETL process would do for a data warehouse. So hopefully that answered the question.
I think so. So we're just on the
Yeah,
end
and
of our
then
time. I think, let's talk a little bit about a real world customer you've worked
yeah,
with, Paul.
yeah. So this is a really good example, right? This is the BMW Group, which I'm sure everyone's heard of. But this example is really relevant to what Christian and I were talking about earlier. And really, the business requirement here was the BMW Group simply needed to more easily scale their analytics platform to support the growing demands of their internal and external stakeholders, meaning customers, right? And the issue that they had was that their data wasn't easily accessible because it was spread across multiple siloed environments. So what happens? Innovation gets slowed down. You have longer lead times to request data, to support new initiatives. So what BMW Group needed to do is they wanted to give their consumers real-time access to vehicle telemetry, like information around speed, location, battery levels, brake levels, all that sort of stuff, and be able to integrate analytics and machine learning into their data lake to accelerate development. So it's all of the things that we talked about earlier. This is just a really great example of BMW working with us at AWS to build a company-wide data lake. They call it the Cloud Data Hub. So it can leverage data to deliver innovation across its global businesses and its stakeholders. That's a really, really good example of a shift from that very siloed approach to a much more inclusive data lake approach, which again ties into Komprise's value, right? Is moving that data from on-prem, multiple sources, multiple data warehouses, multiple unstructured data sets into S3.
That's great. That's a great story. In fact, so let's just wrap. There was a question about Komprise and AWS and the partnership. So Christian, do you want to just maybe summarize? So if I'm an AWS customer thinking about Komprise, why would that make sense for me?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you're a customer looking at AWS and you have a lot of file data, or maybe you've even used some on-premise object stores, there is a simple, non-disruptive way to get started. With Komprise, you can actually look at your data, get an automatic index of all of it, get all the analytics across everything, and you could start tiering data into AWS without any changes to your users or applications. You can start saving 70% right away and use your data natively in the cloud. Those are all some of the things we showed you. And your users like it because not only do they face no disruption, but they get the added benefit of an index that they can search and find and use all the cloud services in AWS. Because ultimately, AWS isn't just a storage locker. It's really an active compute environment for your data.
I love it. So Paul, any final words? I mean, I want to just flash up here. If people want to learn more about Komprise and AWS, you can go to the website. You can send us an email. Any final words for you, Paul, for folks, again, out in the automotive industry or any industry kind of going on this journey?
Yeah, I think thanks, Darren. I think it's really just critical to make sure that whatever you're doing from an architecture perspective in the analytics space, that you remember to keep your options open from both a building perspective and a reporting perspective. I think both of those things are really important. Being locked in to a specific structure can make it really challenging down the road. So, Krista mentioned it earlier. It's not just about storage, right? There's analytics platforms, data movement platforms, right? All these tools to help you, but it's really important to keep the platform open and flexible as much as you can moving forward. But appreciate the partnership with Komprise, absolutely looking to help any of our customers. Please reach out if you have any further questions.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Paul. Krishna, we talked a lot of Komprise about kind of being data centric versus storage centric. I think you both hit that point really well. Any final word from you before we wrap up?
I really want to thank Paul. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully this was informational for our customers. And as you said, try to avoid lock-in. Data is ultimately your corporate asset, and AWS and Komprise can help you with that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed today's session, and I really enjoyed getting to talk to you both. Look forward to our next one. Thank you. Have a great day.